On this edition of Early Look, I'm going to be previewing the main event for UFC Seattle, March 28th, Israel Adesanya, Joe Pyfer. My name is James Lynch. If you've never watched the show before, I'm going to go through a bunch of different stats, a bunch of different intangibles. Then I'm going to give you my prediction for this fight at the end. Let me know after you're done watching the video in the comment section what your prediction is for this fight. Really interesting one going down in the Pacific Northwest. Hoping to be at this event. Still haven't got my credentials. UFC's been a bit late for that and also had some issues at the border recently. So hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll be there for this one. I was at the UFC Seattle card last year, but what an awesome fight. Great matchmaking here by the UFC. Let's do a quick tale of the tape between these two. Israel Adesanya, 36 years old, 29 years old for Joe Pyfer. 6'4" to 6'2", 80-inch reach to 75. So Adesanya going to be a couple years older. More than a couple years older. He's going to have the height and reach advantage, though. He's also got a lot more fights than Joe Pyfer does. Not surprising there with the age difference. And this will be a 5-round fight in the middleweight division. Let's start first with the former middleweight champion, Israel Adesanya. So I mentioned it there. He is 24-5. He's got 16 knockouts, no submissions, and 8 decisions. 36 years old, 6'4" with an 80-inch reach. He'll have a 2-inch height and 5-inch reach advantage in this fight. Trains at a City Kickboxing. He's the former Glory middleweight title challenger. He's the former UFC middleweight champion 2 times. He's had five successful title defenses during his first reign. Had 2, is the first 2-time UFC middleweight champion. He's had performance of the night 6 times. He's had fight of the night 2 times. And he's the only fighter right now in the UFC who has knocked out Alex Pereira. Got to give him his props for that. Adesanya had his amateur debut way back in November of 2009, made his MMA debut in March of 2012, made his UFC debut in February of 2018. His UFC record is 13-5. He's only got 5 stoppage wins throughout his UFC career. Some notable wins include he's got 2 wins over Marvin Vettori. I put Vettori on here. I know there's going to be people saying, oh, Vettori's not that good. Vettori was ranked for a while, so you have to put him on this list. Derek Brunson, another good win. He was ranked at one point. Anderson Silva, Kelvin Gastelum, 2 wins over Robert Whittaker, Yoel Romero, Jared Cannonier, Alex Pereira, and also and Alex Pereira as well. That was his actually his last win, which was back in April of 2023. Some notable losses include Jan Blachowicz, Alex Pereira, Sean Strickland, and Dricus du Plessis. He's had a couple layoffs in his career. He's actually been pretty active since being in the UFC, one of the more active fighters on the roster. But basically since the DDP fight, it's been a little bit slow here. So going from Strickland to DDP, there was a 343-day layoff. And then going from Imavov to Joe Pyfer, there is a 420-day layoff. So this is the longest layoff of Adesanya's UFC career. So that's one thing to consider when you're looking at this fight. Adesanya's had a couple fights that maybe you could say were close. There's the split decision win over Marvin Vettori, although I don't think that was close personally. That was split decision. That was back in April of 2018. 15 media members scored the fight for Israel Adesanya. Just 2 scored it for Vettori. This is on MMADecisions.com. There's also the Romero fight, which was just awful. There's no other way to put it. That was at UFC 248 back in March of 2020. 12 media members scored the fight for Adesanya. 2 scored it a draw, and 7 scored it for Yoel Romero. There's the Jan Blachowicz fight, which I thought Jan clearly won, but to each their own. 19 media members scored the fight for Jan Blachowicz. Only 7 scored it for Israel Adesanya. That was back at UFC 259 back in March of 2021. And then, of course, the second Whittaker fight, which a lot of people feel like should have gone Rob's way. If you go look at MMADecisions.com right now, 20 media members scored the fight for Adesanya. Only 5 scored it for Whittaker. So again, majority of people feeling that Adesanya did do enough to get that win at UFC 271 back in February of 2022. Let's go look at Adesanya's stats here. Significant strikes landed per minute, 4.02. Striking accuracy is at 48%. His striking defense at 55%. He has been hit a little bit. Takedown average is 0.05. Never goes for takedowns. His takedown accuracy is at 11%. His takedown defense is at 76%, which is actually a little bit high. Well, not a little bit, and that's good numbers is kind of what I'm getting at. So that's everything you need to know about the former middleweight champion Israel Adesanya. Now let's take a closer look at the challenger, Joe Pyfer. 15-3 record. You can see there he's got 9 knockouts, 4 submissions, and 2 decisions. He's 29 years old, 6'2" with a 75-inch reach. So he'll be 7 years younger than Israel Adesanya in this fight. He's currently ranked number 14 in the division. I forgot to mention Adesanya's ranking. Adesanya is ranked, you know what, we'll look it up right now. Adesanya's probably in like the middle of the pack, if I'm not mistaken. Let's go have a quick look. I should have written this down, but sometimes I forget stuff. So Adesanya is currently ranked 5. So it's 14 taking on 5. Just one thing to kind of keep in mind there. He's got performance in the night 4 times. He's against Alan Amandovsky, Razak Al Hassan, Marc-Andre Barrio, and Abus Magomedov. He made his amateur. So here, I'm just going to show you the experience gap here as far as the two fighters. And again, makes sense with Pyfer being 7 years younger. So Pyfer made his amateur debut way back in November of 2016. By that point, Adesanya had 9 MMA fights and a ton of kickboxing fights as well. Something to keep in mind. Makes his professional MMA debut back in May of 2018. By that time, Adesanya had 13 fights. So again, I talked about the activity level of Adesanya. He had 13 fights by the time Joe Pyfer made his professional debut. And then here's the kicker. Pyfer makes his UFC debut back in September of 2022. Adesanya had 23 MMA fights and 13 UFC fights. That's a lot of activity there and a lot more experience than him. Pyfer's 6-1 in the UFC. He's got 5 stoppage victories. Pyfer doesn't have a single notable win in the UFC. You can maybe count Gaslam, but he's getting a different Gaslam than the Gaslam that fought Izzy, for being honest. And Gaslam really hasn't been much of a threat or too relevant since then. Like, I don't even think he has a ranked win. Gaslam was ranked at one point, I believe, but no ranked wins here. So that's just one thing to kind of keep in mind when you're looking. I think Abus actually might have been ranked low at one point, but we'll give him that. Let's say he's got one ranked win. And then his only loss was the Jack Hermanson fight, a fight where he was a huge favorite and ended up getting upset in that one. He was, well, not huge. He was a moderate favorite, I guess, -270 in that one. Ended up losing it. Pyfer, because he's only got 7 fights in the UFC, no major layoffs, no close fights. All the decision wins he's won or lost have not been close. Let's look at his stats. So you can see there, Pyfer, 3.47 significant strikes landed per minute. So that's actually lower than Izzy. His striking accuracy is at 43%. His striking defense is at 53%. So he does get hit a little bit. Adesanya's striking defense is a little bit higher. Takedown average is 1.23. So he does get a little bit more than, way more than Adesanya. His takedown accuracy is only at 33%, and his takedown defense is at 50%. His sub average is 1.0. That'll be something to keep in mind in this fight. Now let's go look at the odds. That's where things get a little bit interesting here. Joe Pyfer, currently a slight favorite here, about -128, -130. So he is the betting favorite here. Adesanya, you're going to get him on most books at plus money. Some of them have him at almost even odds, but Tapology tells a different story. This doesn't happen too often. So if you look on Tapology, you'll actually see majority of people picking Adesanya here, 72%, just 28% for Joe Pyfer. That's when you know you got a good fight here, when you get discrepancies like this. And then over on Fight Signal, the AI app, they do favor Adesanya as well at 53.38%, 46.62% for Joe Pyfer. I will do a full AI breakdown of this fight in the coming weeks. So what's my pick in this fight? I've been going back and forth because when this fight got announced, I did feel a certain way, but now that I've kind of dug into the stats a little bit more, I've actually changed my pick, and I'm actually going to be going with Israel Adesanya in this fight. Now, listen, I know there is some worry about this pick, and I'll explain why in a second, but let me first say how I think Adesanya is going to win. I think he wins a decision here. So this is what I think is going to happen. I think Adesanya is going to survive whatever early onslaught Pyfer brings his way. And then I think that's where the experience will take place. Adesanya, I think, is the better technical striker here. Yes, Pyfer's got a threat on the ground as well. We've seen him get some submission wins too. But, Adesanya, you saw how hard it was for a guy like DDP to try and submit him. I don't think Pyfer's going to be as relentless, especially not later in the fight. Remember, it took DDP a little while, and DDP's got great cardio, as we've seen him go 5 rounds a number of times. Pyfer hasn't shown that yet. That was a big issue in the Hermanson fight, was that he did not have good cardio. I just don't see him getting like a late sub. I also don't see him submitting Adesanya early. I think if Pyfer wins, it's because he's able to knock out Adesanya and Adesanya's chin's gone. But I think Adesanya might play it a little bit more safe, not getting like a firefight with Pyfer, and then win a decision and just get the win. I think that's the biggest thing for Adesanya. He's not going to try and go out there and be kill or be killed like he did against Alex Pereira when he won that fight. I think he's going to try and be strategic and win a decision here. Not to mention the fact that if you look at Adesanya, as far as his last couple fights, he's not getting a lot of finishes. If you look at his wins overall in the UFC, at least recently, he did knock out Alex Pereira, but you look at Cannonier, Whitaker, Vettori, those were all decisions. Did finish Costa, Romero's a decision as well. So not as much of and think about it, he's only got 5 stoppage wins, the same amount as Pyfer in his UFC career, but he's got a lot more fights. One thing I think is worth noting is that the Imavov fight, I kind of forgot about this. Adesanya actually outstruck him here, 26-15. So he had a really good first round against Imavov. He gets caught in the second. If you remember, he got hit. I think it was like a straight left, if I'm not mistaken. And then he ends up going to the ground, and it was like a TKO finish. It wasn't like a flat, like knockout punch like we've seen Pyfer do to certain opponents like Marc-Andre Barrio. This was more of like a TKO finish. Now, Pyfer could still do the same thing here. That is a concern for me in this fight. Is his chin gone? I mean, Adesanya does fit in that age range of like a decline here, right? He is going to be turning 37 in July, so he's getting on the older side here. But I think with all of his kickboxing and striking experience, that striking defense will come into play here. So the other thing, and the other thing I was going to mention with Pyfer here just quickly is that you look at his knockout wins, because that I do think the knockout's the best path to victory here for Pyfer, because again, we've seen Adesanya finished in his last fight. But you look at who he's knocking out. Marc-Andre Barriault, he's got a handful of knockout losses. A guy who doesn't have the greatest chin. He's been knocked out 3 times. Gerald Meerschaert went on kind of like a knockout loss streak after he fought Joe Pyfer. If you look at it there, especially the last couple fights, he's been knocked out. He's knocked out in back-to-back fights, but he's been finished a couple times. So that's a little bit like kind of the point I'm making is that like he couldn't finish Gaslam, choked out Abus, couldn't knock him out. Couldn't knock out Al Hassan, who's been knocked out before. Like, I haven't seen him get like a knockout win over like a good opponent. And I think Adesanya fits in that category. Pyfer's also got 53% striking defense. So that's a little bit, something to keep in mind of too, that he doesn't have the greatest striking defense. So Adesanya, obviously his bread and butter is striking. So that's something to keep in mind. And then the 5-inch reach advantage for Adesanya, I think could play a role in this fight too. Use that reach a little bit, utilize the striking a little bit better. And again, I think we kind of saw this fight a couple of years ago. I don't know if Pyfer's really improved the cardio, but like he lost to Jack Hermanson. And let's be honest, Hermanson has not done that well since they fought, right? So, I mean, that loss is kind of looking even worse. And yeah, it was, 2 years ago, but still, you look at that. He's been not, after the, I'm looking at Barriault. Jack Hermanson, since the fight with Pyfer, he's been knocked out in his last 2 fights. Pyfer couldn't knock him out in that fight. So that, again, is a little bit like leaning towards like I don't think Pyfer will knock him out. You might be waiting 5 rounds for the knockout and it never comes. So yeah, this is a tough pick, but I do think Adesanya with his experience fighting way better opposition. Like the opposition isn't even close. I think Pyfer doesn't even have a single good win on his resume. Whereas Adesanya's got plenty. He's the only guy to knock out Alex Pereira. The layoffs are not the layoffs are concerned, the age is a concern, the durability is a concern, but I think it's just enough to beat Joe Pyfer in the Seattle main event. So he's going to be my pick for this fight. So let me know in the comments which way you're leaning. I want to get your prediction for this fight, not just a pick. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram @Lynch on Sports. My name is James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.